Welcome to the Mouthful, a podcast but dedicated to conversation and learning about new people. Today, I have my guest Meghan on the phone on the call. We're here to talk about some stories, share experiences. So, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You're certainly welcome. And so, you're a friend of, well, you're not a friend. You're a sister to one of my friends, Taylor. And just to start on that basis that, we common ground, especially, I couldn't say nice enough things about Taylor, as you would imagine. He's a great person. He's a great guy. And
he's so great.
He really is. He's probably one of the nicest people I know. I'm genuinely saying that. And he has an interesting story himself, of course, but it also was very surprising to hear that he has a sister who is not just, he described his Ukrainian background, he described his Ukrainian dancing and sword fighting, and then he just said that he has a sister who's also black, and I'm like, black. What? And I was, and I'm like, okay, so I was so confused. And it also, to further my confusion, he didn't actually present it as even half siblings for, like, I was like, okay, so I'm so confused. So you do have, who is the black parent? And then he described, oh no, it's half, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a piece of the puzzle that you didn't say what it, and he just kind of attributed to that, and he just said she's always been my sister, and so yeah, he definitely values you, he loves you. He thought that you'd be a great guest to have on and talk about our experiences. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. When he brought it up, I was like, yeah, I could totally do that.
Yeah, I love it. I like that you were pretty eager. You were down for that. So what has it been like? I mean, a lot of people have different experiences in life, obviously, but even in Canada and Alberta, in the same town, same city. I wasn't raised here. I wasn't born or raised in Edmonton or even Alberta. What has your experience been like?
I think, I've been kind of trying to reminisce and go back in my mind sort of all day, or even the last couple of days. My experience is probably is different than probably somebody who grew up next to me that you might talk to as well. Mm-hmm. I was raised on the South Side, in the burbs, if you will, in a primarily white community. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even tell you at what age that I identified or realized that I was, had a different color of skin from other people, let alone from my own family. Mm-hmm. I remember I would have been probably like really young, 5 or 6. We lived in a townhouse, and our neighbor was a teenage girl, and I thought she was so pretty, and she looked like all my Barbies. She had blonde hair and beautiful white skin, and she would lay out in the backyard in the summertime, covered in oil, and I remember asking her what she was doing, and she was like, I'm suntanning. And I thought, well, geez, like, I would like to look like that. Like, Mom, do we have any baby oil? I want to go out in the backyard and suntan. Like, I don't even know what her name was. But, not understanding that, like, she was trying to get darker, and in my little mind, I was like, oh, well, if that's going to make me look like her. In school, there weren't very many other kids who would have identified as having a black background. Mm-hmm. We had some Asian kids, we had some kids that had brown skin, but were from sort of Eastern countries. There was no other sort of identifiable black kids when I was in elementary school that I can remember. When I was in grade 1, there was a boy in my class, and he was kind of the mischievous one, kind of the troublemaker. And for whatever reason, he zeroed in on me, and I was kind of his target. And it wasn't until one day he was like, Meghan, why are you brown and the rest of your family is white? And I was honestly like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I have no idea. I think I was very young. I think my mom, those aren't easy conversations to have with a 6-year-old, particularly when you're going back now, like 35 plus years ago. So it was always kind of a complex situation for me. I didn't really understand it. My mom, through no fault of her own, no blame on my mom, didn't really openly talk about it. I think it was something that made her uncomfortable based on her relationship with my biological father and how that all kind of went down. I have never had any connection or relationship with him. So I remember, when she started to explain to me that Travis, mine and Taylor's dad, had adopted me, and that's why he was my father. And, I was 2 when they got married. So he had just always been my dad. That's all I knew. So I remember her kind of explaining it to me in a very sensitive, very 6-year-old appropriate fashion. But then it was that much more confusing because I had this sort of mystery person that I didn't know anything about, and I didn't have any pictures at that time. And she had explained that Travis adopted me. So then people, I'd say, well, I'm adopted. Like, my mom is my mom, but I'm adopted by my dad. And that confused everybody that was in my age group. So it was a really long time before I was able to kind of properly piece things together, make sense of it in my own mind, and explain it properly. But really, my entire childhood was primarily Caucasian. And I was raised by my white parent. I didn't have any involvement with my black parent, Bill, my biological father. It was white. My friends were white. My community was white. So, I was raised when we would go on summer vacations as a family. We went to my mom's family who were ranchers down in southeastern Saskatchewan. So I was raised with farm life and country music. And, I have friends now as adults that tease me and they're like, you're the whitest black person. Yeah, probably. But that's just kind of felt.
That's and that was a very special upbringing, a different type of upbringing. So do you ever think differently of your father, your adopted father, your stepdad? Or do you just consider him your dad?
He's just always been my dad. He and my mom met when I was probably about 10 months old, before I was even a year. Wow. So I was still very much in infant development, and that has just always been my connection.
Wow.
I did later on go to be able to learn about Bill and have some photographs and some music of his and such. But I was curious about Bill, but I never felt a longing for or felt like I was missing a piece of me. That was just Sue and Travis are my parents, and that was my foundation, and this is my family.
Yeah. I mean, something I've learned definitely in life and experiences is that people can take such different perspectives on how their upbringing was, and especially during adoptions, because there's people who just would only ever want to have identified with the fact that they had lost a parent or lost, both parents in a way where they felt that they have, almost been robbed by, even despite the obvious fact that coming into the adoption was offered a better life for them. Right. I mean, people, mothers especially, but parents don't generally give up children unless they have to or are forced to. So coming into it, but even in my personal experience, it can be night and day when people say, "Oh no, this was terrible." White parents, I've heard this. simply put, even though I strongly disagree, is that, some people believe that white parents should never raise black kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so so you never felt that longing did you feel that longing when you were younger? Did you think that, glorify the other parent that wasn't there, your father?
No, not ever that I can remember or think of. And even to this day, I later learned in life that Bill, my biological father, passed away probably around the time that I was 15.
15?
Yeah. So he was alive a lot
Oh.
of my childhood, but my mom got married and changed her name, and I was adopted when she got married. So my name changed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest thing for me is that I also became a parent at the age of 15. So that has definitely played a huge role in, my rate of maturity and how I thought about things in life and understanding things from a mom's perspective. He could have found me if he wanted to. He could have reached out. He knew who my grandmother was. He knew who my aunt was. People that he could have connected with. And I think, my mom just knew that he was likely not going to be a stable, consistent, healthy and nurturing parent to me. And so, she kind of went about her business and got on with her life. And as far as I understand, she did sort of give him the opportunity, like you can be in or you could be out. She already knew his choice was going to be out. So, I think in my own experience then as being a young mom and experiencing an inconsistent parent with one of my own children, I'm very grateful that that wasn't a part of my life, that I wasn't that kid that was forever disappointed by their dad or waiting for their dad, canceling on their dad. All of that was never a thing. I always had, a secure, loving, safe landing pad as a home and as a family.
Yes, exactly. And the fact, so you didn't have a deep connection. I think it may be due to age, because it's what people yell at me, say to me, is that it's due to my age. I was only 2.5 when I was adopted, and I didn't have a yearning whatsoever to need to know about blood family. I have since, but it is due to other brothers wanting that and needing that in their life, needing to know, and then we've been able to connect. So, I just never myself needed to reach out, just as I guess, maybe probably age is a big factor. But when you had I never, it's hard to really conceptualize for me, actually being a parent or becoming a parent, even if you didn't want to at the beginning, right? But it's so strange to me, and it happens so frequently that men especially, sometimes women, but men especially, will actually just fully leave, or like, you had these children, and then it's worse if they actually knew you and loved you, and then you kind of just, I'm making my new life. But I'm not sure why, but it's almost stereotypical that there will be, especially when a man finds another partner who doesn't have children. I'm not sure why, but the rate of him making a new family and being like, I did have these children, but I have a new wife, and we want to kind of move and have fun. And they might even make a whole new family. And it's like, well, why did you completely forget the others? It's hard for me to wrap my head around it. But how did you end up? Did you come to terms with it when you became a parent yourself? Did you empathize at all, or did it actually do the opposite?
Sorry, we were really choppy there for a minute. I don't know if it's my connection. It looks okay. So I missed the end of what you said there.
Oh no, dang, I thought I delivered it beautifully. Okay, I'll just repeat it. No worries. Okay, so the fact that you that it can happen, and unfortunately it happens in a staggering rate, for men, fathers, leaving families, starting new life. But how did it affect you when you became a parent? Do you empathize with him at all? Or was it the opposite? Or was it like, how could you have done this when I know what it means to be a parent?
Right. Yeah, I think maybe even a little bit of both. And the empathy might come from, again, just that gratitude from me that like I didn't ever have to experience that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, as a parent, and as a parent of a child who had a father who has taken, sort of big hiatuses out of her life, I also share, like, how do you know that you have this amazing little human being out there?
Yeah.
And you're just going about your days like they don't even exist. That piece of it is unfathomable to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like to think that maybe it's, maybe shame or guilt sort of overtakes and they're just sort of frozen and not sure how to, or if they should. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
As
like
a mom to my own child, that feels very like inexcusable to me.
Yeah, exactly. I could see that. It'd be for me. I think personally, for me, that would actually cause more resentment to have known, like, how could you have done this, and to realize. I mean, I wish they would realize that there. How can you not regret it later on when you have known that these people, this person, or these children will become, adults, and they'll go about their lives, and you'll die without having known or loved them, really. And
Absolutely.
I mean, there's people who, yes, and it's not that's almost stereotypic as well, as a father being like, oh well, I had a family at my previously, and I left them, and then they at their deathbed they're regretting, like, oh, what happened to these people who moved on. But I don't know. It happens. I just had a conversation with a friend that it's happening to, and I'm like, how is it happening? You think that the cycle would stop? I mean, the fact is, 2022, it's going to change, but maybe it has a little bit, but I don't really think. I think it's so biological that it doesn't seem to, like, friends going through this, even like our parents went through it, like crazy.
And I think like you say, like, you would think it would stop somewhere, you'd break the cycle, but yet you hear about it continuously. I'm a social worker, I work with families, and I hear all the time stories of, and I don't mean to go after the dads, but in my experience with the people that I've surrounded with in my life, it's just been the case that I tend to be around more women, and it's often like that the dads have just sort of pieced out. It's like, wow, it's really unfortunate.
It really is. Out of curiosity, what would you think if you could put any percent or number, what do you think the percent of men versus women leaving might be? Have you seen it as close to 80-20 or?
I don't know about now. Certainly in my experience as being a teen mom, I would say it was 80-20 for sure, if not higher.
Okay.
Now, age and maturity and emotional maturity and all those things played a big role at that point too. And I say that, but yet in my next breath, I'm thinking, but I'm still here. My friends are all, we all raised our kids. We didn't leave. We didn't walk away.
Right.
So, yeah. They don't get that confused or excused. We were all young.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting that you became a parent early, but you still realize that you can. I feel like it's such a important thing, and it does seem natural, but I do think it's also as times are progressing that people want to do better than their parents did. I see that a lot, and with new parents, friends who are parents, and it's just, it it warms my heart because, you know, just like a lot of shit that people did back in the day is like it's becoming less and less.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I used to be, it's interesting too because I I don't know. I honestly think that maturity and age does also soften people in a large degree. If I had, I mean, I feel like I would have been stricter when I was younger than now. When I talk to people who have children, and I think I call it like the new age parenting, where it's much more about what are you feeling right now in conversation, and very, very, very hopefully what the goal, and people tend to do it, is that they very, very rarely yell. Like, it's very minimal when people say, "Oh, I'm sorry." They can even apologize. "Oh, I'm sorry, I yelled at you." I'm like, "Oh, that's a yell." That's not what I remember. But yeah, no. But it is interesting that it's different. But now going to life, I understand it more. I'd be more, if I ever become a parent, I would be much more, to a large degree, that cycle too, because I just see how, I don't know. It just seems like the kids are happier in general in life. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're forever evolving and changing and learning about, social emotional development and how these tiny people change. And I will fully admit I was a yeller. I was a yeller, but I wasn't a spanker.
Yeah.
If you go back to like our childhood,
Yes.
Taylor and my brothers and I, we teased my dad all the time because for a long time there was 3 little boys that shared one room.
Oh,
and
wow.
I had my own room because I was the only girl. And my dad was usually very patient, but if there had been enough nonsense and he was done, he would call from the couch out to the boys and just say, "It's spanking time." And then they knew, like, you better lock it down. Dad's coming in here and somebody's going to get a smack. So I wasn't a spanker, but I was definitely a yeller at my kids.
No,
None of
that's
us were
understandable.
traumatized by it. We're all fine, but
yeah, but
it
you're
generationally.
it definitely does. And I mean, your dad was older, right? He was quite old, so
Yes.
he took
Yes.
from his generation.
He was 14 years older than our mom. Yes. So, yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't remember. So he's like 73 now or something, right?
He is 84.
Oh, right. Okay.
Our mom just turned 70 in the fall.
Right. Your mom is the one who said 70, because it's interesting. Like, well, with my family, we actually skipped a full generation through the adoption. My parents adopted while in their early 40s. So, we skipped an entire generation between us. Yeah, my parents are now in their early, just getting into 70. But so it is interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
How things have changed.
Yeah, and I think, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think
say that, like, being a young mom, I think people often kind of watched me parent and thought, like, my ex used to always say, like, "Well, you can't be their mom and their best friend." And I was like hell I can't. Watch me, and
yeah.
He disagreed with a lot of my parenting styles. But to this day, my kids are 23 and 27. My 23-year-old will say, like, "Don't judge me. My mom's my best friend." And, we're very close. We're very tight. And I always say, like, we grew up together, really, literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think it's interesting in a way where I think the old style, this is my assessment. This is my I'm just surmising, but I feel like the old style of parenting was meant that for, and I mean, like, for older generations too, is that it created a lot of resentment rate when they were kids into teens. But then later on, it seemed like a lot of times people, they rediscovered their became closer again when they were, late starting their own families and like into the early 20s, and then they came back in a way to the family. Whereas like now it's kind of like trying to seems much more like trying to consistently be the same relationship.
Keep it level all throughout the lifespan.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, and I think that's great too. So you were in a primarily white community. Did you face any racism other than that guy being curious and mischievous?
Yeah, to be honest, I can't say that I have ever experienced racism in my life, which I am so grateful for.
Wow.
I have never felt again, like going back to childhood, there was that kid in grade 1 that sort of pointed out that I was brown and questioned that in a, kind of bratty way. And then once when I was probably about 12, I was also in Ukrainian dancing. At that point, probably the only little brown-skinned child in Ukrainian dance. And I don't remember what the event was. I want to say it was like the Commonwealth Games or something. It was a big deal here in the city. And this girl, who was probably a few years older than me and definitely should have known better, sort of the same thing. She was like, why are you in Ukrainian dancing? Like, obviously you're not Ukrainian, sort of thing. And I was a pretty meek kid. So when on the few occasions that somebody did confront me in that manner, I just, I didn't even know what to say. And I just sort of shut down and walked away.
Right.
But yeah, in a global picture of my life, I really have not experienced racism, not blatantly anyway.
Yeah. That's very lucky because I don't know. I feel like we have a much different experience here in Canada, and especially, well, I would say in most Canada, because the amount of times I've talked to people who will say that similar things, or they didn't experience like what I consider like real racism, as in like direct and very blatant in your face, and like that, okay, that person's being racist. There's sometimes where it can be like, oh, was that a racist scenario? But I mean, we have to keep in mind, and this is why sometimes what I disagree with my brothers about is that like there are people, especially in the States, that have racism. They could even, they're not lying. They're saying I experience racism almost every day. I experience it at least several times a week, and that's I mean, we are spoiled in a way, I think, here, because it's just my experience. I have not had blatant. Well, there was one time, but I'll explain what happened on that. Is that like this? They were clearly not doing well in any way, in mentally, physically. There's these two people, friends, moving, and there's like a guy who, like, they were stealing a cart, but like they're homeless. They looked homeless, right? And they were moving, and it was a crosswalk, and I was walking, and I wasn't even in their way really, but the guy, I just was walking, and then one friend, the guy pushing the cart, was like, "Get out of the way, nigger!" And I'm like, and he was this young guy too, and the other friend was like, "Hey, what the hell, dude?" And I was just like, it was so random too. The guy, I mean, they were homeless, so there's a lot of other shit going on in their life for sure, right? So,
sure, complex situation.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So that wasn't really, to me, that's like just a random person punching down in a way, like, or trying to punch up, I guess, because if you're, it didn't look like he was in a proper state at all. But I mean, I mean, sure. Did you have anything when you were in school at all?
No, Like really, no. People, as I got older, people were always kind of curious, but I feel like as you get older, you know to be a little more sensitive or appropriate in how you're asking versus the 6-year-old that was like, "Why are you brown?"
Yeah.
But often people just didn't ask, and I don't know. I mean, I'm very visibly different from my family, but people often have mistaken me to be like Hispanic. People have asked me if I'm indigenous, like Chilean, everything but, oh, are you like half black by any chance? So, it's, yeah, maybe it's because people don't think that I'm black. I don't know.
Well, that's interesting. You're like racially ambiguous is what they would. I don't know. Was that what they would think?
Yeah.
That's kind of
The
interesting
half
though.
black girl that likes to be on the farm and listen to country music.
But I mean, like in the way that you would almost be able to move through different crowds and international, and no one would like, oh, okay, she's coming from the Dominican, or she's coming from, all these could be completely valid too. So it'd be kind of,
Yes.
that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and it is interesting because I will admit when I was younger, and I don't know where it like necessarily started. I think it was just me seeing the color that people were, but I used to just really wish I was half black, and just because I just love, I still do the gold skin, and I just love it. I like the idea of being a different blood and mix is I think beautiful. So I feel like for a while I had like this, want. I would just wish I had been. I was, but obviously can't do anything about it. But yeah, that's interesting. I think. What about the?
Yeah, and I see that as very similar to me looking at the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I was
for
just
sure.
going to say the girl in the backyard watching her tan and seeing her white skin and thinking, oh, maybe I can transform myself to that with some baby oil and out in the sun.
Yeah. I mean, it may just come down to what you aren't. So you just think of, I wish I could be this,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think, and being raised around, predominantly Caucasian white people, how did that affect you? How did you see that affect you? Did it affect who you were interested in? Did it affect who you found attractive?
I would say quite the opposite, actually. I certainly, I remember having crushes on guys in junior high. Once I got to junior high, it was a little more culturally diverse.
Mm-hmm.
But like my first crushes in that were generally white guys. And then we had a Safeway near our house, and there was a young black man that worked in the produce section there. And the first time I saw him, I was just like, oh my God, that's the most beautiful human being I've ever seen in my life. And developed this like ridiculous crush on this grown man. And then that, I would say, kind of shifted me. Well, once I hit about 19, then I was like, maybe I'm going to date black guys. 18, I guess. And so then I went through, I guess you could call my black guy phase, if you will. And yeah, it just, I would say for a large majority of my young adult life, I was predominantly attracted to black men.
Okay, after that point. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with the upbringing, it definitely colored who you, well, it's even just down to who you see around you and see, oh, that other boy is cute, or because I'm gay, obviously. But like you find this person cute and you find this person cute.
Yeah.
Right. So I felt like, and in my school, there was like, when it was for a very short time, but when there was the most, I think it was like three black people, maybe four black people. And in, that's in a normal sized, well, medium sized school. So there almost no black people, very few people even of any color. Right. But, so I think that kind of did color my perception of beauty for a little bit, which was not good. I feel like it was just part of growing up. But when I was younger, I was like focused on, and it's actually not, to be fair, it wasn't actually even just necessarily white people. It was just actually just liking other races, and I still am a lot like that. Where to me, it's like I chalk it down to more that I find it more boring to be with someone who is exactly the same background, because I like to know, oh, this person is from, it doesn't matter where. Literally, I have no. It doesn't matter. India, it could be any other place, any interesting background, but I just find it really boring. Like, oh, I'm also from this band. I'm like, oh, well, that's boring. And I know a lot of people are completely different. A lot of people, they want, they gravitate to, similarity. And I'm like, oh, boring.
Likeness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And interesting. I don't remember exactly what you said, but something about the, being at that age and sort of developing your views on what, on like beauty standards and what's attractive and what you want to look like. That's a tough enough age when you're in that sort of junior high school phase. And, I remember, like, I've got crazy curly hair. None of my friends had curly hair. Everybody had straight hair. And back then it was like the curled under bangs with the bump and all these neat styles that I loved and could not make my hair do, no matter what I tried. Makeup trends. I was like, oh, I love that look, but it looked ridiculous on my skin.
Right.
And so maybe those were kind of things at times that looking back, if I had somebody in my life that, sort of coached me through that. My mom did her best, but makeup and hair are not her forte to begin with. So that was hard for her too.
Yeah. I mean, it is, yes, you're just at a vulnerable stage in general, anything, very sensitive to anything, any difference that you have. And I mean, I remember it being for a little while, it actually hurt and it's not because anyone was actually mean or at all about it, but I just felt very, unattractive because no one, how people would like look at, oh, that person's very attractive or he's cute or like I would want to date him. Like I know, different, but I didn't get that any sort of attention on me. So it was like, I knew I wasn't ugly. I knew I wasn't, especially back then when I was like this tiny little skinny, beautiful Twinkie boy, but it was kind of like, I just was like, why am I not in anyone's equation of, oh, and I'd ask people like, oh, do you think, and they're like, oh yeah, you're very cute, but it'd always be kind of like in the way of, just, I don't know how to describe it, but just distant, like, oh, well, he's, just not what I would ever consider to actually be in my realm. Yeah.
Right.
But so it's
that piece was tough.
Yeah, I mean, you're just very sensitive at that time to anything. You pick up on it, but you just have to put things in. That's when you don't know to put things into perspective. I guess that's the way to phrase it.
Yeah.
I think that comes with age. But you didn't have.
It
so
definitely
when you
does. Age and experience and.
Yes. Yeah. So you didn't have a negative experience being in Alberta at all then?
No, not at all. And I have, I've been at rodeos. I used to go to reggae parties. The clubs, like I've never, from childhood to date, not had a negative experience.
That's
which
great.
I'm very grateful for, because I'm sure that's not everyone's experience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It might be harder in the smaller towns, but I haven't had any problems here at all either.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
So when you went through your black phase, as you called it, do you mean that do you ingratiate yourself into black culture here or wherever you could find it? Was it also outside of just dating? Was it into,
Not, no, I wouldn't say
consuming culture?
hardly. It was primarily dating. At that point in my life, um, I was going to the clubs. I was finding clubs that were sort of more like an R&B, hip hop sort of genre, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I met my younger daughter's father, he was Jamaican, is Jamaican. And so at that point, then I started to have some exposure to the reggae parties, to Kari West, to, hanging out with groups of people from the West Indies and attending those things. But, as much as I enjoyed all of those experiences and enjoyed the company and the music and the food, I also felt very out of place. Didn't really feel, if you will, like I was black enough to hang out. And I think that often there was some like endearing teasing, and it was meant lightheartedly, and it was meant fun about, how white I was and this and that. But, it was never overly comfortable.
Right, I see.
Not that they were bad experiences. I just always felt a little out of place.
Yes, yeah, I could see that where it just wasn't in your background either. It's interesting that, there is that ribbing from both sides, I feel, but I actually take it much more, personally. To me, one of the biggest pet peeves I've ever had, and not just me, but also my brothers, is that when people say you're not white enough, or you're too white, or you're black, that has always been all of us. I mean, because all of us people have said that too. It's like, well, I mean, for one thing, we were raised by white parents, but it's also just, to me, it's a ridiculous premise. It just frustrates the hell out of us. Because like, what does that mean? That are we not? Do we have to address as gangster? Do we have to have an accent? Which, we're not even American. Why we would not have an African American accent? It would never happen.
Exactly.
Like that's due to for a large degree, that's due to being less educated, or being from an area that people were traditionally less educated, right? You might yourself become educated, but a lot of times that's where the accent first came from. So what are you saying about us?
Very different sociology.
Why would I speak? Exactly. Why would we start just saying that? Like, I know Canadian, like Black Canadians who do it as, and we do, and I mean, I do it sometimes just as, but it's more as in like, to empathize or empathize. I can't speak right now. To emphasize a point, or to make a joke, right? But it's not that it's it's something I carry with me. Like I have to always be this way. I just feel, and there's just so many negative stereotypes where when people say things like, "Oh, you're not black enough," it's one of the biggest pet peeves. I hate when both people say it. Someone said it to me recently, and I was just
and I guess
ridiculous.
That's the piece, right? It's like they say it in sort of a condescending, negative way. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not white, obviously. Look at me. Was I raised Canadian?
Yes.
Was I fortunate enough to be raised in a lovely middle-class community and go to good schools and, be taught a certain way and be raised a certain way? Yes, I was. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm very grateful.
Yes, exactly. It's just, and I mean, I still love the quote of, in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Carlton, of course, he's campy, he's ridiculous, but he says when this fraternity was not wanting, I love this scene, you'll just memorize it, where he's wanting to join the fraternity, he's very excited about it, and Will wants to get him in there, get some new friends, get some honeys, but then one guy just says like, oh no, he can't be in the sorority, he's not black enough. And then Carlton just says to him, like, why do we do this to each other? Why do we hurt each other like this? We're supposed to be all on the same side. And I love that. I remember watching that as a kid and just being like, that's, to chalk it down to, oh, you're not this enough. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, have you been to outside of Alberta, seen other communities?
I have, yeah. Like I said, my mom's family is all in Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. That is a very, very small rural farming / oil hamlet. It's not even a town. It's a tiny little community. And so again, I don't know if there is just because it's so small, because everybody knew my mom, because I was always, Sue's kid that she brought to the farm and happened to not be Caucasian. Pardon me. I've never had anywhere. I've traveled to Eastern Canada. I've traveled in British Columbia. I've been in small farming rural communities. I work in a small rural community. I work for Leduc County. So I'm out and about in all the smaller surrounding communities. I've just never had an issue.
That's very lucky and also very surprising, because that's where I've heard of, any vestiges of racism still surviving in Canada, of like the small towns, and not even just small town, like the very small town or, insular communities. But it's great that you haven't had that experience.
Yeah. And actually, I spoke a little too soon. As I was thinking about work, I did have, probably about 5 years ago, one of my clients' grandmothers, who I think at the time was also not completely with it. I think she was in some early stages of dementia. But my client did make it clear afterwards that her grandma does have some struggles with other races. Mm-hmm. And I showed up, because I do a home visitation program. I showed up to the house, and her grandma was in the backyard. But all she said, what is she doing here, in this sort of like nasty tone? And my client was just like, don't worry about it, Grandma. We're going to, she lived in the basement suite. We're going down to the basement. So that, I guess, would be like my only experience in a rural community in adulthood as well. I've forgotten about that.
And you have, who do you work with primarily? Do you work with adults or do you work with the kids?
Yeah, I work with adults. My program is targeted to adults. We do, a lot of our participants have families, so it ends up trickling down to family support, really. Mm-hmm. But I support adults who either have a diagnosis or show strong indicators of having fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a long-term, intensive home visitation program.
That's very hard. The fetal alcohol syndrome is very hard for them to manage, and the fact that they can go through rages and it can be very strong people.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. It's a spectrum. I guess they moved it to a spectrum for a reason, because it can be completely unidentifiable just in conversation with somebody. You would never know with a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
And some consistent support and sort of hand-holding, for lack of a better term, I don't mean hand-holding in a negative way, sort of wraparound support, connecting them to community, and giving them that circle. There's a lot of strength and abilities within the population that I work with too.
That's great. So is it something that they like, I guess it's actually just unfortunately that it's the already affected brain, and they wouldn't. It's not that it's a scenario where they would recover, right? But you just continue
That's right.
to care.
So ultimately, their moms, while pregnant, consumed alcohol, and that affected their brain.
Mm.
They used to say that it was an organic brain injury, but we've since we're working on different, more positive language that we can use to describe that. That's sort of less offensive, if you will.
Organic. What would be organic? Just like that. It's
Meaning that they were born with it. So not that it
yeah.
naturally happened. It happened because of the consumption of the alcohol, but it's a permanent and lifelong disability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, that's hard. And do you have a lot of people you work with, or is it in a one home?
No, it's in each client. All of my clients live independently, in
Okay.
some form of independence. Right now, my caseload, I probably have about 15 individuals that I work with.
Oh, wow.
And then, like I said, that kind of trickles down to their partners might have some challenges, their kids might have some challenges, kids might have no challenges whatsoever, but mom or dad or whoever I'm directly supporting might need some support in parenting. We
Wow.
kind of triage them when they come into the program. So we want to make sure that they have food security, housing security, and some form of income. And we work to connect to healthcare because a lot of them are lacking basics like a family doctor, optical care, dental care, mental health care is a big one. So yeah, we kind of start top and work our way down through the list of things that they need.
Mm-hmm. So they may not have, like, I guess when someone would have fetal alcohol syndrome, does it mean that they will, I don't know how to word it. Does it mean that they will get constant care from childhood and it's known, or do they have to get diagnosed later on in life? How do they come to be in your care?
So it's evolving certainly, and it's come a long way even in the 15 years that I've been specifically working in the FASD field. Some participants the younger they are, I find, the more assessments and such they've been able to access throughout their schooling or, through medical care. I have clients that I work with that are closer in age to me. Some who were raised up through the foster system or were adopted. And so there's sort of a missing piece. They maybe didn't have the same assessments. We didn't know as much about FASD or were even able to identify it, 40 years ago. So it just kind of depends on where they're at, both in age and what their upbringing and lifestyle looked like. I find that the people that I work with that were adopted typically have had very stable upbringings and have had access to things that some of my other participants just didn't have based on their upbringing and how they were raised.
Okay. So
Yeah.
For the record, in your experience, parents who adopted were wanting to give them a better life versus what they had previously.
Yeah, and had the ability to do so.
Oh, that would be so hard wow. I mean, even because I guess even if that's the mother has given birth and she could still be consuming alcohol and be an alcoholic wow, that would be, and the child would have the fetal alcohol syndrome. That would be just such a messy scenario. All this that could just breed so many terrible scenarios. So I think that's a great thing that you're doing and great work, because some people I don't know could do it.
Yeah, it's I really enjoy my work. I often laugh because my mom was a pediatric nurse, and specifically with children with cancer. And I would tell her, share certain things about work, and she would say, "Oh God, Megan, like I could just never do your job." And I would think, my God, like you work with dying children and support their families, and the
Yeah.
people I'm working with have some very complex needs, but like for the most part, they're okay. They have me, they're fine.
So
So
what
yeah.
led you into going into that field? Was it seeing that what your mom was doing?
So in part, yes. I am very squeamish. I could not do the medical piece of nursing. There's just too many gross things involved in that. People used to always ask me when I was a kid, "Oh, are you going to be a nurse like your mom?" And my mom would be like, "No, I don't think so." But I have also always been a caregiver, right? I'm the oldest of our 4 kids, and I think
Oh,
some
there
of
you
it
go.
just comes naturally.
Yeah.
Some of it, of course, was role modeled through our parents and our mom. So I always knew I wanted to do, whether it was a teacher or at one point in time, I thought maybe I wanted to work with special needs children. And then when I had my first daughter, like I mentioned before, I was 15, and I left my high school and went to a school that was for pregnant and parenting teens. And when I got there, I again sort of, in a sense, felt very out of place. A vast majority of the young women that I went to school with were from very different socioeconomic backgrounds
Okay.
than I was from. A lot of them, or I shouldn't say a lot of them, many of them did not have supportive families. Pardon me. Many of them were living on their own, parenting their children, trying to go to school, living in, borderline poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was, this like nice little girl from the southwest side of Edmonton that had a loving family. I still lived at home. I had lots of help, lots of support. If it was too cold, my mom drove me all the way to Capilano schools, but I wasn't standing out at the bus in the cold,
wow.
Pregnant and not feeling well. And there was just none of that. And I had an excellent, each girl was connected to a counselor at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And my counselor just became such a huge part of those 3.5 years of my life.
Wow.
She was such a support to me. She was so warm. And I remember just kind of watching these girls, my age, some younger, some older, struggling. And I thought, like, okay, like this is not an ideal situation, being a 15-year-old pregnant girl, but I'm very, very lucky. And I have it significantly easier than some of these girls. Maybe this is what I'm meant to do. Maybe this is where I want to be. So that's what led me to social work in general as a field.
Okay.
And in my first year of the program, I did my practicum with an agency here that had some programs that were specific to FASD. So that's where I had my first exposure to that.
Okay.
And I went into that with some very specific judgments, I guess, or preconceived notions about mothers who consumed alcohol while they were pregnant. How could they do that? Drinks while they're pregnant, everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much in that first year, and it brought down so many judgments that I had and really helped me understand the complex needs of addiction, the complex needs of mental health, of poverty, of all of it sort of wrapped into one package, and how that can lead to varying problems for people.
Mm-hmm.
I was really disappointed about getting that practicum. It's not where I wanted to be my first year. I don't remember where I wanted to be, but it wasn't there. And I ended up loving it. I really, really connected with my supervisor. We are still friends to this day. And then my second year in the program, my placement was at Terra Center, which is the agency that I attended school when I was expecting my first child, and where I connected with that counselor. And so when I graduated from Grant McEwen, they had a position open for me.
Oh, wow.
So I immediately went on to work with pregnant and parenting teens and families. Yeah. And so I loved it. It was like, I absolutely loved it. And then
Great.
5 years into that job, my supervisor from my first practicum called me and said, hey, I'm starting an FASD program out in Leduc County, and I really want you to come and be my staff. Like, I'm trying to poach you. And I really like hummed and hawed about it. And at that time I was trying to buy a house, and the kids were getting older, and it was far better pay because it was municipal government versus nonprofit organization. So yeah, that's kind of how I came to the FASD world.
And so it seemed like a good flow between having that relationships and then going into yourself. It does seem like a lot of times when people go into a career that is, social work or helping or teaching, it's from seeing good examples in their life before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And you wanted to, it's almost like you wanted to help others.
I mean, my mom was, yes, always, without the gross stuff.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, I feel like it, and it's not. It definitely is a hard job. It's not for everyone, and doing stuff like that in order to teach or offer care for people is very difficult. I have a friend who she works with people who I can't remember the name of it, where the actual position, but where you're TA, but you're when it's mentally handicapped people, and it seems so rough sometimes. Yeah, people can flare up. They can have they can start violently attacking her, and there's boys that are they get strong. They get especially if they're just big bone strong already or genetically, and then they have that aggression in them. And there's people who she said, I know some people who can't work with this person because he's attacked them and they're too small, or but she's able to somehow. And it seems like so hard to be in that world and to have that much patience and kindness.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it just comes down to what your strengths are, right? If I had to go and sit in an office all day and do accounting, mm-hmm. I would find that very hard, very draining. I would be miserable. Mm-hmm. My oldest daughter is also a special needs educational assistant and works with children who are on the autism spectrum. So what you were describing sounds very familiar. She's just with little kids. But, I mean, she's had a black eye. She's had scratches. She's had her gown ripped off, her face attacked. Like, that doesn't happen in my FASD world.
No.
Different kind of spectrum, very, very different. But no. But yeah, if I had to do any other type of job, I would find that that's not where my strengths are. That would be very taxing for me.
Yes, I could see that. Even though it's similar, there is difference. I'm curious though. I thought when for some people it can manifest in aggression and violence.
No, I wouldn't. Aggression and violence are not sort of co-symptoms of FASD.
Oh, okay.
You might be thinking of like the ASD, which is the autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
So people with an FASD could look just like you and I. They can speak and communicate normally. It's more of a, they might struggle with some social skills. They had a hard time in school. They have some mental health issues. Not to say we haven't had the odd participant whose mental health issues were so severe that, maybe we teamed up to work with them or something, but very, very different from those like emotional outbursts or things that you would see.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Spectrum disorders.
I feel like okay, so just as a side note, then I have one of my mom's friends' grandchildren, grandson. He he was said to have that, but then he was be very violent towards everyone, even to his grandmother, who was the one raising him. So maybe it was something that there was something else as well, because he'd have such violent outbursts that she.
Yeah. So sometimes what happens, yeah, sometimes what happens with an FASD, again, we're changing the language, and I apologize that I'm not completely abreast of it all yet, but the old language, we would call it comorbid disorders. So FASD is sort of the big umbrella. That's the diagnosis. And then underneath that, there might be depression, anxiety, mental health.
Oh, wow.
Might look like a oppositional defiance disorder. Could be ADHD, could be dyslexia. Like there's a whole plethora of other things that happen because of the effect that's happened on that little brain when it was developing.
Oh, I see. Okay. So both things could be correct. That he did have it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Because I remember that very strongly. But I thought that was typical of the brain. But that's interesting. I didn't know that. Well, I mean that. Yeah, and that's great work. I don't know if I could do that. I feel like that would be a struggle. And how would you have been able to have done this and then have still enough patience and care to have children? That to me is like a triumph.
Well, when you start having kids at 15 and then 19, the kids came first, and then the social work career came after. I just always knew that I wanted to work with and care for people in some capacity. And I knew that nursing was definitely not going to be it for me. And then my experience as a teen mom is what really was the driving force behind it. And then the FASD world just kind of fell in my lap later in life. I have been told that I have patience almost to a fault sometimes. Sometimes I'm too patient with people in my life. Not work people necessarily, but in other experiences in my life. I think in relation to parenting, one of my kids struggled immensely with depression and anxiety as a teenager. And I remember thinking, like, I'm a professional. I deal with this kind of shit all the time at work. And I can be patient and understanding and give all the resources. But when it's your own kid and you're struggling, and they're a teenager and you're already struggling to kind of connect and understand, I remember feeling at such a loss because it didn't feel like I could connect my professional abilities and knowledge to my own child. And now in hindsight, I understand that, like, in a large capacity, we're not meant to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Did I find her resources that she needed? Yes, I did. And then I moved her to that and let that person, deal with it.
Yeah. I feel like that makes sense where it doesn't, I strongly feel that however a parenting style is, it still will not be enough for a kid coming up, a teen coming up. I just feel like it always seems to be the best option. I like the phrase, the old term, it takes a village to raise a child. I think in large part that makes sense because a lot of times people do have to still step out, even if their parents were open to conversation and open to talking and there for them, you still talk to this person, you talk to this teacher, something just, I feel like that's also very important. So that makes sense where, you would think that you could solve every issue because you have this training, but it's, they may not even want that realistically, right? They may not even want that.
Exactly. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. And, I think that that village mentality goes even beyond child rearing. We all need a village and a community, and that circle of support that I refer to like in my work. Everybody needs that.
Mm-hmm. And when you were growing up, you didn't feel that you were lacking that at all. You had that support, that village.
Yeah, I mean, I was always very fortunate. I had lots of friends. I met my best friend when I was 6, and we are now 43 and still best friends to date.
Oh, that's great.
I have been exceptionally lucky in my life to have solid, long-term relationships and connections with people.
It's so crazy to think of, the kids my friends are having and stuff like that, and now they're, they have play dates and friends over and those connections, and that it started like that can happen. That's what it's starting again. And because I'm friends with people who I was raised with, and we're living up the street, and we had a long street that we would, if you were bored, you could walk up and then find someone along the way. All these different kids who were raised in walking distance, and just like, wow, you love them so much. Just like, it's so special that I have them. I mean, I can remember times like people I was introduced to. I remember like, oh, this is my best friend, and then they became my best. We all became best friends together. And it's just like, wow, it's
crazy.
God, I kind of almost like wish
with people because I was just going to say that, like, I often think about little kids and how easy it is for them to make friends when you're really young, right? You see somebody and you're like, oh my God, hi, I'm Megan. Do you want to be best friends? Okay.
Right.
And then we're best friends, and I often talk about that with my kids and the participants that I work with, and talk about, like, it's hard to make friends as an adult. And I'm so grateful that I've had these lifelong friendships because, I make friends easily, but I don't have to put forth a lot of effort to, like, putting myself out there in scenarios and being like, oh my God, hi, I'm Megan, I'm 43. Do you want to be my best friend? That's hard. I can't imagine. And it would be so simple if we could do it like the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds do. It
would be. I just wish you could be that outgoing and happy. And it's one of the things that I just find very beautiful right now is I have friends who, well, actually a couple of friends who have kids who were my age when I was adopted, and it just sometimes just seeing it and soaking it up is just, I don't know, it gives me chills. It's so beautiful to imagine that was what I would have been like, that as happy and sweet and joyful all the time. And then that, it's just, I don't know, it's weird to think that was me at one point.
Yes. There was nothing to worry about.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Nothing to worry about. Everything's happy. And just enjoying life, running around, no care in the world. Yeah. Thank you so much for, taking the time to talk to me. I enjoyed it. I'd like to hear your perspective. I wanted to talk to someone who was, who had a different background than people I typically talk to on the podcast. But someone who has that mixed race or, Black background as well. So I thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about it. It was very interesting. And thank you for what you do. I really do mean that. Like, I think social work is just the angels can do that. It takes so much love and kindness. So yeah, you're doing great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this. This was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, and thanks to the listeners. Please like, subscribe, all those things. And I'll catch you in the next one.